Chosen one, this isn't random. It's a call your soul already answered in silence. This is not just another message online. This is the moment your path aligns with what was written about you long before you were born. You have been pulled here because the quiet seasons of your life were never wasted. They were preparation, a hidden scroll unfolding in silence. For years, they misunderstood your restraint, but heaven has been watching, sharpening, and sealing you. This message is not just words. It is confirmation of what you always felt but could never prove. They thought your silence was weakness, but it was prophecy being written inside you. And today, you will understand why it shook them more than anything you could have spoken. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Because the truth you are about to hear will shift how you see your silence forever. Chosen one, what if I told you that the quiet they mocked has always been your most terrifying weapon? Stay with me, because before this video ends, you will know why they feared your silence more than your words. Number one, the silence they couldn't bear. For so long, they tried to provoke you into arguments, to bait you into outbursts, to pull noise out of you that could be twisted against you. But when you stayed still, when you did not give them the reaction they expected, their own shadows screamed louder than your voice ever could. 1 Kings 19 verse 12 reminds us that God was not in the earthquake or the fire, but in the gentle whisper, and that whisper carried more authority than thunder. Your silence unsettled them because it mirrored their guilt back to them, a reflection they could not escape. In the quiet, their mask slipped, their contradictions surfaced, and their false confidence shattered under the weight of their own conscience. They dreaded being around you, not because of what you said, but because of what you carried. Comment, I seal this word in light. If you know that your silence has always revealed more truth than their endless noise, and stay with me, because the stillness you held is about to open into a deeper revelation. It often begins like a dream that lingers long after waking, a whisper that does not fade but follows you into the daylight. You remember sitting in rooms where words flew like arrows, yet none of them pierce you because you chose not to answer. What they mistook for weakness was actually a different kind of power, one that did not need to announce itself. In your silence, you began to sense something ancient, a strength not of this world but of the spirit. They were unsettled not by what you said, but by what you refused to say, because silence held up a mirror they could not shatter. 1 Kings 19 verse 12 tells us that God was not in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire, but in the gentle whisper, and this is where your truth always lived. The whisper in you grew louder than all their shouting, and it reminded them of what they could not bury. You know what it feels like to be baited, to have someone push you, hoping you explode so they could use your reaction against you. How many times did you walk away, carrying the weight of accusations that silence made heavier? Still, something inside you refused to hand them the evidence they wanted. There was an ache in that choice, but there was also a sacred dignity. Each time you did not answer, the stillness exposed what their noise tried to hide. Their shadows screamed louder than your voice ever could. And in that revelation, you started to realize the truth. Your restraint was not emptiness. It was judgment, prophecy, and power unfolding quietly. The more silent you became, the more their performance crumbled. They had built themselves on appearances, on manipulation, on false narratives they thought would stand forever. But when you did not engage, those illusions collapsed under their own weight. Zechariah 2 verse 13 says, "Be silent, all flesh, before the Lord, for he has roused himself from his holy dwelling." Your silence was not passive. It was a sign that heaven was moving on your behalf. They wanted noise to drown out the guilt rising within them, but you gave them none. That absence became unbearable because it left them alone with themselves. Have you noticed how some people could not laugh freely in your presence? Even when the room was filled with chatter, their smiles faltered the moment your quiet eyes turned toward them. It was not your intention to expose them, but your silence did what arguments could never do. In the quiet, their contradictions revealed themselves, their masks slipping piece by piece. Your presence alone carried a weight that words could not carry, and they felt seen in ways they did not want to be seen. Amos 5 verse 13 says, "The prudent keep quiet in such times, for the times are evil." Your restraint in dark times was wisdom, and that wisdom became a judgment no one could escape. And while they dreaded it, your silence was also your own teacher. Every unspoken answer carved patience into your bones. Every moment you chose to withhold your words became a furnace where endurance was forged. It was not easy to be misunderstood, to be mocked for what looked like weakness. But what they didn't know was that heaven was shaping you in secret, preparing you for a voice they could not withstand. Their accusations were temporary, but your silence was eternal training. You were not shrinking, you were sharpening, hidden in plain sight. Looking back now, you can trace the patterns. The strange heaviness you felt when walking into certain places, the sudden unease around certain people, the way tension rose without cause. These were not coincidences, but confirmations. Your silence unsettled atmospheres, not just individuals, because spiritual realms recognize what human eyes cannot. Even when you didn't understand it, the energy of your stillness carried authority. Habakkuk 2 verse 20 declares, "The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him." When you stood still, heaven's throne echoed in you, and they could not bear it. What seemed to them like nothingness was the very space where God spoke most clearly to you. Nights of solitude that felt unbearable became the scrolls where revelation was etched. Dreams you barely remembered carried patterns that only now you begin to see. In silence, the codes of your destiny were forming, hidden even from your conscious mind. They thought nothing was happening, but everything was happening beneath the surface. Their noise was shallow, your stillness was depth, and that depth was always beyond their reach. So, chosen one, understand this. Your silence was never weakness, never surrender, never emptiness. It was a chamber where heaven refined your fire and revealed their shadows. They could not bear it because it spoke what they tried to bury, and it carried a power they could not control. Your silence was prophecy in disguise, preparing the roar they fear will undo them. Comment, I carry the silence as crown. If you know this word is yours, and let your testimony anchor in the light, because the stillness you held has finished its work, and what it formed in you is about to become unstoppable. Stay with me, because this silence, this weapon they never understood, is only the beginning of what heaven is about to release through you. Number 2, the codes hidden in quiet. What they thought was emptiness was a scroll being written inside you. Every pause, every night you spent wondering why nothing seemed to move, was actually alignment happening beneath the surface. Amos 5 verse 13 says, "The prudent keep quiet in such times, for the times are evil," meaning silence itself can be wisdom, a shield from snares set against you. In your dreams, in strange repetitions, in whispers you cannot explain, heaven was encoding messages that only now are beginning to make sense. Patterns you dismissed as coincidences were actually signs, keys meant to prepare you for what was to come. Silence was never the absence of movement. It was divine math unfolding, calculations of destiny hidden in plain sight. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you understand that the quiet held codes meant only for your spirit, and know this, the scroll written in your silence is now being unsealed. It begins as a subtle unease, like walking into a room where the air is heavy though no one has spoken. You may not have had words for it, but you felt the invisible hands that seemed to push against you. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet resistance, delays, odd glances, small betrayals that stacked like stones. These weren't random irritations. They were signals that your path had an unseen opponent. Like the faint shadow before a storm, these moments warned that your silence was carrying weight they couldn't tolerate. The world whispered to you that you were different, but it didn't explain why your difference seemed to agitate others. That quiet heaviness was not weakness. It was the first code being written into your spirit. You remember the ache of being misunderstood, when your intentions were twisted or ignored. They called you too sensitive, too quiet, or too much, when in truth you were carrying layers of sight they could not comprehend. Their rejection cut deeper because it wasn't about what you did, it was about who you were. Shame tried to creep in, telling you to mute yourself, to blend in, to abandon the parts of you that stirred unease in others. You cycled through self-doubt, wondering if maybe they were right, if maybe you were broken. But the truth was that your inner fire disturbed those who had chosen shadows over light. Their resistance was simply the echo of your assignment pressing against the limits of their comfort. When you step back now, You can see there was a structure behind the pressure. It wasn't just people, it was systems, patterns, forces designed to suppress your rise. Like Israel wandering in the wilderness, your journey was not punishment but preparation. You weren't just walking through desert seasons. You were learning how to survive when no one else could feed you truth. The opposition you faced was training, sharpening your discernment like a blade. What you thought were empty pauses were actually heaven aligning you with divine timing. The scroll of your life was being etched, sealed in silence until the appointed hour. Look back with clear eyes and you'll notice how the patterns repeat. The sudden betrayal when you were just beginning to trust, the dream that recurred until it refused to be ignored, the way doors slammed shut just before breakthroughs. These weren't coincidences, they were codes, instructions wrapped in disappointment, meant to redirect you toward destiny. What seemed like wasted seasons were actually rehearsals, lining your steps with precision. Every strange obstacle was confirmation that you carried something unusual, something targeted. It's unsettling to realize, but clarity is often born in the review of your scars. Now you see what was hidden. The resistance wasn't random, it was revelation. There were moments when the resistance felt almost supernatural, like the air thickened against your breath. You walked into environments and felt drained without explanation, as though invisible watchers were present. Closed doors and sudden silences became part of your daily rhythm, leaving you to wonder if the world was conspiring against you. Yet even in those shadows, light was embedding itself into your being. Zechariah 2 verse 13 commands, "Be silent, all flesh, before the Lord, for he has roused himself from his holy dwelling." Your silence was reverence, a shield, and a code written in the language of eternity. What they thought was emptiness was heaven, encoding messages for your spirit alone. And yet, you must admit how it shaped your reactions. At times you shut down, withdrawing into yourself because the weight felt unbearable. Other times you tried to appease, dimming your light so others would not feel threatened. There were moments you rebelled quietly, choosing solitude over compromise, even if it cost you companionship. You wondered if surrendering your uniqueness would bring peace, but deep down you knew it would only kill your essence. Fear whispered that standing out meant standing alone, and sometimes you listened. But even your silence in those moments was not defeat. It was a furnace where strength was tempered. Here is the truth rising now. Resistance was confirmation, not condemnation. They fought you because they sensed what you carried, even before you did. Their sabotage was a signal that heaven had marked you with an assignment greater than their control. Every delay was actually a safeguard. Every attack a clue that your destiny could not be ordinary. Your voice may have been quiet, but the codes within you were roaring like thunder waiting to break. You are reclaiming what silence preserved: authority, clarity, unshakable resilience. What you thought was suppression was the secret protection of your most sacred power. Chosen one, know this. You were opposed because you are powerful. The scrolls etched in silence are now being unsealed, and their resistance only proves your purpose is undeniable. Every shadow that tried to mute you has become proof of the fire you carry. Comment, "I move guarded by divine fire," if this word resonates, and let it seal into your spirit. Because the codes hidden in your quiet are no longer dormant. They are awakening in you now. And as they awaken, the same silence that terrified them will become the foundation of your revelation. Stay close, because what is being revealed next is not just for you, but for every destiny tied to your name. Number 3, the whisper that broke chains. They wanted a storm from you, but heaven gave you a whisper. That whisper was not weak. It was a sound that shook chains, the sound that carried the authority of restraint. Zechariah 2 verse 13 declares, "Be silent, all flesh, before the Lord, for he has roused himself from his holy dwelling." Your quiet was not passive. It was alignment with divine timing, a silence that made heaven rise on your behalf. In that quiet, enemies unraveled because they could no longer blame you. Their own guilt was the only voice in the room. What looked like absence of defense was the highest form of defense, because heaven was testifying louder than you ever could. Comment, "I rise marked by the divine." If you have felt that your quiet has carried judgment, revelation, or protection, and share the dream, the sign, or the memory that confirmed it for you, because what was whispered in stillness is now roaring across your life. It often begins with something small, almost imperceptible, like the shift of light in a room or the sudden stillness before dawn. You may have dismissed it at first, wondering why silence seemed to echo louder than words. Yet there was an undeniable clarity in those moments, as if unseen hands were parting a veil that had long been draped over your sight. A memory resurfaced. A pattern that once confused you began to take shape, and suddenly you realized the pieces were not random at all. That quiet realization was a whisper that carried more authority than any storm they demanded from you. The very moment you thought nothing was happening was the moment chains began to loosen. Heaven was speaking through restraint, not noise, and you were being taught to hear it. Numbers appeared in ways too consistent to ignore. Dreams replayed with symbols that refused to fade, and phrases spoken by strangers carried echoes of eternity. What seemed like coincidences were codes hidden in plain sight, scrolls waiting to be unsealed by your awareness. The world had been speaking to you through geometry, rhythm, and divine alignment, not in chaos, but in precision. Your silence made space for these messages to emerge, because noise would have drowned them out. Zechariah 2 verse 13 speaks of silence before the Lord, a silence that signals divine readiness. And that is exactly what you embodied. The codes etched themselves into your being in ways that logic could not comprehend, but your spirit understood. You were not losing your voice. You were gaining the language of eternity. As these codes intensified, something within you shifted. Your intuition sharpened to the point where you no longer second-guessed the warnings rising in your chest. Boundaries that once felt impossible to maintain became non-negotiable because you recognized how environments shaped your spirit. Your body itself began to testify. Chills in certain places, unrest in others, a sudden surge of peace when you walked into alignment. This was not imagination. This was your spirit calibrating the truth. The whisper became a current running through your being, awakening sensitivity that was always meant to protect you. They thought you were withdrawing, but you were tuning into a frequency they could never decode. And then the external began to mirror the internal shift. Relationships shifted. Some people recoiled, while others were drawn closer without knowing why. Opportunities appeared where none had been, but so did strange opposition, as if light itself was rearranging the stage. The whisper inside you had moved beyond your soul and was shaping the architecture around you. Amos 3 verse 7 reminds us that the Lord does nothing without revealing his secret to his servants, the prophets. And you began to realize those secrets were being whispered through your life. Every closed door was not rejection, but redirection. Every sudden ending was a chain breaking under the weight of hidden revelation. You were walking through a reality that now reflected heaven's math. It is here that memory awakens, not as something new, but as something long forgotten. A dream from childhood suddenly makes sense. A vision once dismissed returns with clarity. And you recognize that your soul had carried the script all along. The whisper is not new. It is ancient, resurfacing now that you are ready to hear it. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 declares that the vision awaits an appointed time, and though it lingers, it will not delay. That appointed time was hidden in your silence, and now it is unfolding. You feel the magnetic pull of remembrance, the sense that you are not becoming but returning. What you thought was absence was memory finding language. What was once a mystery is now identity reawakening. And as memory aligns with destiny, the future begins to shine differently. You no longer ask for permission to carry what has already been stamped on your soul. The whisper has become a call, summoning you not to create but to reclaim what was always yours. Resistance now reads as confirmation, opposition as proof that you are moving in rhythm with divine cycles. The same silence that once felt like emptiness has become your foundation of authority. Your words, when spoken, no longer chase recognition, but carry the weight of revelation. You are not inventing purpose. You are stepping into prophecy written before time. The time of shrinking is over, for reclamation begins in the whisper that once restrained you. They thought your silence was submission, but it was strategy. They thought you were buried, but you were being planted. Every attempt to mute, you only amplified what heaven was preparing inside you. Your voice now carries scars as seals. Authority is breath. Fire is cadence. Isaiah 30 verse 15 says, "In quietness and in trust shall be your strength." And you now understand that strength has always been whisper-born. What felt like suppression has become the evidence of divine investment. The chains they forge have become the testimony of the freedom you now embody. Revelation is not the end, but the invitation to walk differently. The whisper that once protected you now propels you, a reminder that heaven's authority has always overshadowed their accusations. Chosen one, your silence carried judgment, revelation, and defense all at once. Comment: I walk hidden yet never lost. If this word strikes your soul, and share the sign, the dream, or the moment you knew heaven was speaking in your stillness. Let this not be a message you consume, but a code you activate. For what was whispered in your hidden seasons is now roaring across your life. Stay with me, because the next unveiling will not just explain why you were silent, but why your return will shake everything built against you. Number 4, when your voice finally returns. After silence has finished its work, your voice rises with authority that no one can contain. Habakkuk 2 verse 20 says, "The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him." That silence was a preparation for your voice, and now, when you speak, it is no longer for recognition, but for revelation. The words you carry now shift atmospheres, break illusions, and open paths no opposition can close. They dreaded your silence, but they will not survive your return, because the sound you release is prophetic, carrying the weight of scars, endurance, and fire. Your voice is no longer personal. It is heaven's decree spoken through your vessel. Comment: I anchor this truth in my soul. If you feel your voice returning with power, and share the moment you knew you could no longer remain silent, because what silence prepared in secret will now thunder across everything built to stop you. There comes a moment when the silence you carried no longer feels like stillness, but like pressure building before a storm. You begin to sense that every unspoken word, every restrained thought, has been gathering weight in the unseen. The quiet that once felt like exile now feels like a furnace, compressing power into every breath you held back. It is as though heaven itself waited for the fullness of time, and now your voice emerges as a seal being broken. Habakkuk 2 verse 20 reminds us that silence before the Lord is not empty but preparatory, a temple waiting for sound. And now, that sound rises in you as something more than human. It rises as decree, unchained, uncontainable, undeniable. In the beginning, you may not have recognized the shift. Words left your mouth differently, carrying a weight you did not place there yourself. Conversations that once drained you now silence others because truth enters a room with you. They who once dismissed you begin to tremble without knowing why, because your voice has become the sound their illusions cracking. You are no longer repeating opinions. You are releasing revelation. What you release cannot be debated because it does not belong to argument but to prophecy. And prophecy always carries an authority beyond the reach of resistance. Think of Moses, whose stammer was once seen as weakness, but whose words shattered Pharaoh's empire when heaven breathed through them. Think of Jeremiah, who said he was only a child, yet his voice was made like fire and the people like wood in its path. Think of Ezekiel, commanded to speak to dry bones, and his word became wind and sinew and resurrection. Your voice is now entering that lineage, the lineage where human inadequacy is overtaken by divine decree. Every scar in your life has been pressed into your words, giving them resonance no smooth speech could ever match. This is why they dreaded your silence, because they feared the day would end. And now that day has arrived, and the silence is transformed into thunder. It is not only others who hear the change. You feel within yourself. The sound of your own words surprises you, carrying echoes of something ancient, something remembered. You realize that you are not simply speaking. You are recalling the voice that spoke creation into being. John 1 verse 1 reminds us, "In the beginning was the Word," and now you taste the truth of that mystery in your very mouth. Each phrase feels like an echo of a greater sentence already written, a continuation of scripture whispered through your existence. The same power that hovered over waters is now pulsing in your syllables. Your speech has become alignment itself, pulling heaven and earth into agreement. And once you feel this, you cannot return to the days of being voiceless. Your enemies cannot endure it, because this sound reveals what they spent years hiding. They wanted you to scream, to argue, to stumble in noise, so they could dismiss you. But instead, you waited, and now your return is not with argument but with verdict. Every chain they forge rattles at the frequency of your release. Every mask they wore crumbles under the vibration of truth passing through you. This is a fulfillment of Isaiah 55, verse 11, that God's word does not return void, but accomplishes what it was sent for. And your life has now become the channel of that unstoppable return. Even in ordinary spaces, the effect of your voice is extraordinary. A simple statement carries healing. A quiet word breaks fear. A soft phrase plants courage. You are not trying to inspire. You are transmitting. People will not even know why they feel lighter after you speak. But it is because heaven has moved through you. Silence trained you cut away waste, to strip words down until only essence remains. Now that essence strikes hearts like lightning, quick and undeniable. And what once was withheld is now pouring out with holy precision. This is why you can no longer stay silent, because the silence has already finished its work. To remain quiet now would be disobedience, to withhold revelation when it is time for unveiling. Revelation 12 verse 11 declares that they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Your testimony has become a weapon, forged in hidden fire, sharpened by restraint, and now blazing with undeniable clarity. Every time you speak, you are cutting cords, dismantling lies, and breaking spells cast against your destiny. Your words now carry the endurance of years you survived and the authority of heaven that preserved you. You are no longer afraid of being heard, because being heard is your assignment. Chosen one, you did not just recover a voice, you recovered your inheritance. This voice was never meant to beg, to justify, or to seek approval. It was meant to decree, to unveil, to open, to seal. You are the living reminder that silence was never your defeat. It was the womb of prophecy. What you now carry in your mouth is the roar of destiny disguised as whisper until its appointed time. Comment, I stand chosen and sealed. If you know the silence was only your preparation, and share the moment you felt your voice shift into something beyond yourself, because this return is not an ending but a beginning, and the sound you release will echo far beyond this moment into the corridors of eternity. Chosen one, this is the truth they never wanted you to know. Silence was never your defeat. It was your preparation. What looked like wasted years were actually seasons of refinement, prophecy, and sharpening. Every unanswered insult became a brick in the fortress of your endurance. Every overlooked night was a hidden classroom where heaven taught you resilience that cannot be bought or borrowed. The silence they mocked was a crown being fitted on your spirit, a crown they could not see, but one you now carry openly. From this day forward, you no longer view your silence as weakness. You see it as a furnace of unshakable strength. And as you rise, the silence that shaped you will become the roar that undoes them. There is a moment, chosen one, when silence begins to speak louder than thunder, and you realize it was never emptiness but incubation. What looked like absence was a breath before the song, the pause where heaven aligned your timing with eternity's rhythm. Think of quantum collapse, the wave appearing as particle only when the gaze is ready to receive it. In the same way, your silence was potential energy, infinite possibilities condensing into the singularity of purpose. They thought nothing was happening, but entire galaxies of destiny were forming in secret within you. Your stillness was not void but density, the hidden weight of eternity pressing against a fragile shell of time. And now that shell is cracked, revealing what was always alive inside you. You remember the years of restraint, where you questioned if your voice had vanished, yet even then it was being sharpened. The sword is not honed in battle but in hidden friction, stone against metal, silence against a restless heart. The prophets knew this. Elijah found God not in wind, earthquake, or fire, but in the whisper that emerged after silence swallowed noise. That whisper is not weakness. It is a distillation of truth. Words so stripped they carry only essence. Every insult you swallow became fuel. Every delay became refinement. The world measured you by sound, but heaven measured you by endurance. And now that endurance has transformed into authority. Authority they cannot steal. Chosen one, your silence has always been your weapon, your shield, and your crown. Now that silence has completed its work, your voice rises not for noise, but for prophecy. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment, I am chosen, to let this message anchor in your soul. Please, share it with someone who needs to hear this. The silence has crowned you, but the voice will carry you into destiny.